tuned in to Watch This with Eryk and Brandon, the show where we make a friend watch a movie or TV show that they've never seen before. What do they think about it? Is their opinion the same as ours? That's what we're going to find out today. And on today's episode, Eryk and I are going to discuss Boyz in the Hood in honor of John Singleton, who just passed away recently. I've seen the movie. Eryk just watched it for the first time. And we'll get Eryk's reaction to the movie as a first-time viewer. And my reaction as someone who's seen the movie before, and we'll discuss our favorite scenes, where it ranks among other movies that had a cultural impact.
Right, and this was a very, very good one. We want to say right off the bat, spoiler alert, you know, we're not necessarily going to be doing a deep dive into the plot or anything, but we're also not going to be watching out for that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
You know, we might let slip a plot point at some point, so watch the movie if you haven't seen it yet, and then revisit this. We'll be here.
All right, so let's get right into the background. It was released in 1991. It's American teen hood drama, written and directed by the late John Singleton. Now, it was his directorial debut, and it stars Ice Cube, Cuba Gooding Jr., Angela Bassett, Laurence Fishburne. Great cast.
It was an incredible, incredible cast, and amazing to me that he was so young, John Singleton, and that the cast, a lot of the cast members were so young and relatively inexperienced when it comes to acting, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but that was really impressive to me watching this.
Yeah, and they filmed it in South Central Los Angeles, California, October 1st to November 8th of 1990, and it was released July 12th, 1991. And in 2002, the United States Library of Congress deemed it culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. And it was selected for the National Film Registry, which recognizes films that deserve preservation. So it's made a big impact.
Absolutely.
It's a big deal.
Really, really high honor for this movie, and well-deserved. I mean, it's definitely one, now that I've seen it, it's definitely one that belongs when we're talking about the great movies of all time, especially because of its cultural impact, which, like you said, we're going to be talking about a little bit later. And you mentioned that John Singleton had passed away recently, and so we wanted to do this sort of as a tribute to him. I mean, this is a movie you've mentioned to me a few times in the past and said, like, hey, this movie's great, we got to watch it. So we decided to do it now because he has passed. So let's talk a little bit about John Singleton before we get into our reactions, because this guy was a pretty impressive guy. Born in L.A., South Central Los Angeles in 1968. He went to USC, School of Cinematic Arts, and he graduated from USC in 1990. So, like, right around the time they started shooting this movie.
He was just a kid.
He was a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely incredible. And I heard a story, actually, that when he was a little kid, the reason why he kind of got himself into movies is because, like, every weekend or whatever, you know, his family would take him down to the movie theater, and it was just one of those things that just grabbed him early, right?
Yeah.
But when he was just a kid, so he pursued it in college, and apparently they were, you know, they had different projects and things. You know, anybody who's been to film school will know, you know, you have to make films at film school and everything. And so they were writing scripts, and one of the scripts that he actually submitted at one point, I think it was called Summer of '84.
Right.
And it was kind of an autobiographical thing, and that ultimately sort of ended up becoming Boyz in the Hood, that script that he submitted in college. And I mean, it's pretty incredible. And
the fact that he insisted that he be the one to direct the project is pretty ballsy. And at that young of an age in Hollywood.
Yeah, because it's one thing to submit a script and just to get a production company to be interested in the script and want to make the script, but for you to also say, yeah, I know I'm 24 years old, but I want to also direct this.
That's right.
It's pretty incredible.
And he's a black man as well.
And that's the other thing, too. I mean, it's, which, I mean, at the time, I mean, well, we might as well talk about this now. This movie was nominated for a few Oscars.
Right.
Best Screenplay, Best Director. He still, to this day, is the youngest person ever to be nominated in those two categories at 24 years old, and was the first black man ever nominated in those two categories.
And you don't see directors these days at 24 years old. There's not many.
They're
movie
really
directors anyways in Hollywood. I mean, there's other ones on TV and stuff. But
it's one of those things. If a production company is going to buy a script and really take seriously making a movie, they want somebody with a little bit behind them,
has
right?
Some chops. They know what they're doing.
Exactly. And not even that, just like experience. Like, you know, what has this person done in the past? How many movies have they made? Can they run a movie set, and will this movie be done within the time limit? Because that's something that a lot of people don't necessarily consider. And so, I mean, just incredible that he was handed the reins to this movie, so to speak. Didn't win those Oscars, but just the fact that he was nominated and still to this day the youngest is incredible. And he went on to direct a number of movies, Poetic Justice, Higher Learning, the reboot of Shaft in 2000. I have to say the only movie that I have seen by John Singleton other than Boys in the Hood is the movie Four Brothers.
Right, with Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah. I mean, this is, it's been a while since I've seen it.
I haven't seen it. I don't remember a whole lot about it. I've seen it too.
I would like to rewatch that one now that I have seen
that one down the road.
Yeah, possibly. I mean, that was, I do remember enjoying it. I think we watched it in high school.
Yeah, probably. It's been that
long. How old would I have been?
Yeah.
They showed us this in high school. Anyway, it was a very, very good movie, and might as well talk about this. April 17th, he suffered a stroke. John Singleton did. He was placed in intensive care, was put into a medically induced coma just a couple of weeks later, and passed away on April 28th at the age of 51. So, yeah, this episode is sort of a tribute to John Singleton because he had an incredibly impressive career. Started at a very young age in a time when, you know, a lot of black directors were not handed projects like this. So the fact that he wrote it and directed it is pretty impressive. So this is our sort of tribute episode to John Singleton, so to speak.
All right, let's look at the prediction of what you thought that the movie was going to be about, because I've told you about it and I said that you need to watch it. So what did you think?
Well, you know, I kind of, I have to admit, I kind of knew going in what this movie was more or less going to be about. I knew that John Singleton was from South Central Los Angeles, and I knew that parts of this movie were semi-autobiographical. So I knew that it was going to be about life in that part of the country, that part of Los Angeles. I didn't know what the overarching plot was going to be. To be honest, I didn't know that it was going to start out with them as kids. Yeah. And then I thought it was just them as adults the whole movie. So I didn't know about that. So there are a few things about the plot details that I didn't know, but I knew some of the actors who were in it. I knew that Ice Cube was in it, and Cuba Gooding Jr. and Angela Bassett. I did not know most of the plot, but I think for the most part I had an idea what this movie
general understanding
was going to be about.
So what's your reaction to it? What did you think?
Well, you know, like you said, this is a movie you've told me about, and this is another one of those movies that whenever I mention, you know, oh, we're talking about Boys in the Hood, or, you know, people have said, I can't believe you haven't seen that yet, right? Because it is one of those movies that is so culturally important and significant, and so I have to say this one lives up to the hype in a big way.
Absolutely.
I'm glad I finally have seen this movie because I really, really enjoyed it. I mean, we talked about John Singleton. One thing that really stuck out was his age and his inexperience. I mean, this is something that we sort of talked about with Orson Welles and Citizen Kane about how this was his first movie, and you know, and so it was kind of his ignorance about filmmaking that made that movie charming and made him sort of innovate a lot of these techniques and everything. Now, John Singleton had a film school.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I don't think he was ignorant about making movies, right?
But still, you know, first big movie, right? Yeah. And very, very young. And that really struck me because one of the big things a director does, I mean, the director on a movie set is pretty much in charge.
Yeah, he runs the show.
They run the show. They're in charge of pretty much everything, or she, absolutely. And so, but the big thing is they have to direct the actors, right? They work with the stars. And the fact that he was so young, working with a lot of kids, for the beginning of the movie, working with people like Ice Cube who are new to movies, the fact that he was able to pull out these performances from these people who were also relatively inexperienced was really incredible to me.
Quite impressive, yeah.
Yeah, because the performances in this movie really, really stuck out. I mean, the acting was incredible. I mean, we had some veteran actors, Angela Bassett and Laurence Fishburne, who were great, who were absolutely great. But like Ice Cube's performance in particular really stuck out to me because after we watched the movie, I did a little research, and I mean, this was basically his first, at least his first major movie.
He might have appeared, but I mean, he was used to doing rap and like with NWA and all that stuff.
This is something I wanted to bring up a little bit later, but why rappers are such good actors.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that when we talk about our favorite characters, because I would like to talk about Ice Cube, but I think that's an interesting topic. And I was also, as I mentioned, I mean, I saw Four Brothers, but I don't really remember that, so I really wanted to pay attention to, you know, some of the stylistic choices that were made in this movie, and I would describe describe this movie, and this is a movie that, or a word I should say, that's thrown around a lot when critics and people are reviewing movies, and that is stylized. And to me, what I mean when I say that a movie is stylized is clearly the director or whoever's creating this movie had a lot of creative freedom.
And he had a motive of what he was doing. Or
Right.
He knew what he was up to.
Didn't take a lot of notes probably,
Yeah.
and kind of did what he wanted to do. And you can tell that, yeah, he had his hands all over this, and that's a good thing, because there was some really incredible scenes. Like one that springs to mind is the break-in scene near the beginning when Trey first moves in with Furious, and then they have that guy breaks into their house, and you see the faucet is dripping, and both of them are sleeping. There's that like saxophone music playing in the background, and he wakes up and grabs the gun and everything. And that was just such an incredible sequence. And to me, it's like, okay, that is a scene that the director was like, oh, this is how we're doing it.
Yeah, no questions asked.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And really, really well done. Interesting choice of music and how it builds to that crescendo of him blowing the two holes in the door and everything. I mean, really, really amazing. And then you go from that right into an incredibly well scripted scene that, where the police officers show up, and it's the black police officer that is being racist
and
to
the white guy's being like calm, cool, and collected.
Yeah, sort of. And I mean, or at least just like standing back and like, okay, you say what you want to say, sort of thing. And it's kind of it's one of those moments that is big eye opener.
Yeah.
And there are many moments in this movie that are big eye openers about the realities of life in South Central Los Angeles. And so when that black police officer is the one who's being racist to these two people, and they have that back and forth. I mean, that script was incredibly well written.
Yeah.
The dialogue in that moment was incredibly well written, and what a heavy moment after that, sort of almost action scene of all these cuts and the gunshots going off and all that, and really, really incredible directing. It's incredibly shot. It's well edited. I mean, it's well written. I mean, this movie is very, very well done, and I mean, as I said, it was partly autobiographical, so maybe that played into the authenticity of the movie.
I think so, yeah.
And I think it did, because and it's also autobiographical for a lot of the actors in the movie as well. And as I mentioned, we will be talking about Ice Cube later, because I think that's an interesting topic. But you have seen this movie many times, and so what do you think rewatching?
So watching it, obviously I knew what to expect going in. It does still hold strong today.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, considering it was released back in 1991, and they really portrayed life in the hood. Not that we know what it's like to live in the hood.
But it's important for us to see it.
Yeah, but you get an understanding about what it was like living in South Central Los Angeles at that time, and even now. I mean, I'm sure it's still, not great in some areas. Yeah, not ideal.
I mean, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, John Singleton only being 24 when he directed is also something that's impressive. We talked about that. And when's the last time you heard of any major movie director that was 24 years old? It's unheard of almost at this point. The acting was good. Great. We mentioned Ice Cube as being his first role, too, or his first major role. And it seemed like he'd been doing it for years. You'd think that he was like, he'd been doing it forever.
Yes. He seemed to be very comfortable.
Yeah. And I lived that life to an extent. I don't know if he was heavy into gang activity and all that stuff, but he was in NWA and he grew up in the hood, and it really shows in his character, and I think he did a fantastic job.
Yeah, very authentic.
And the story itself is believable, I think. You got a group of friends all obviously going down different paths in life. You got Ricky's the football star, Doughboy, who's Ice Cube, is the gangster. Trey's kind of the level-headed, good type kid. His father raised him right, and he's kind of trying to figure himself out too. But you feel the brotherhood, and they're all there for each other. And that's about all I could have to say about that. I really enjoyed it, and it still holds up today.
Yeah, it really is an incredible movie. And, we mentioned at the top that we're going to be talking about other movies that had a cultural impact. Because, that's really, I think, the lasting thing about this movie is that its impact on American culture has resonated over the years and has stuck around. Right? This is still a movie people talk about, which is great. And there's quite a few others. I think we should start with ones that maybe just had a pop culture impact.
Okay.
Movies like Star Wars and Jaws.
Right.
I mean,
people didn't go into the water after they saw Jaws.
Right. But then also, it's kind of started this whole shark frenzy. Right.
Shark Week.
Shark Week and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the first one that kind of kicked that off. And huge movie. Big box office success. And I think when they showed it on TV for the first time in the late 70s, I mean, that was one of the most viewed TV programs ever.
Yeah.
And so it's just, that one had a huge impact in Star Wars. I mean, come on. You know? I mean, has
what do you
there
say
been
about Star Wars? I mean, it's everywhere now.
I mean, there have been movies that have beat it at the box office in the last 40 plus years now. There have been movies that have surpassed it at the box office, but is there
nothing's
anything,
lasting
no,
like Star Wars.
Absolutely not.
Like, I mean, the Marvel movies they're pretty important and they're big, but I don't think, because for the time when Star Wars came out too, I think that was a big.
And it was so impressive how it looked and just the scale of it, and so that really. And I mean, could we say that it kicked off geek culture, nerd culture in a way? I mean, it might have, right?
Could have.
I mean, this is 40 years ago, and there were other sci-fi movies and stuff before that, 2001: A Space Odyssey, stuff like that. But I mean, I think that movie kind of made it made it cool to be like a nerd because everybody saw Star Wars, right? And so I think that has that's still having a big impact on pop culture in general. Now, moving on to some other scripted movies like Boyz in the Hood that had a cultural impact, not necessarily just a pop culture, but a impact on American culture and really the world. What are some of those
I've got
movies?
The Thin Blue Line. Right. That's shook people's faith in police officers altogether. It's a true crime documentary. And it focuses on the corruption in their justice system.
Right.
So that tells a story of a guy, his name was Randall Dale Adams. He was convicted and sentenced to death for a murder that he didn't commit, which was later overturned. So, I mean, that really shook things up for people.
Absolutely.
They didn't trust police officers anymore. And, they showed the racist side of how things work in the justice system, and it's unfortunate. And then there was Bowling for Columbine,
right?
Obviously about the big school shooting, which I was in high school when that happened. That was it was what
98 or 99?
Yeah, so
at the end of that
I
decade.
think so. Yeah. And anyways, that was when Michael Moore went to Kmart, confronted them, and then they ended up pulling their guns and ammo off the shelf. So I mean that was another
talk about
huge,
a cultural impact, in the gun crazy culture that is the United States. And it still is to this day, right? It hasn't really slowed down much. But to go to a major retailer like Kmart and actually get them to pull guns and ammunition off their shelves because of the impact of your movie.
They claimed that wasn't the reason why, but everybody kind of
the timing was a little suspect.
The timing's a little off. So.
Right. And while we're talking about that, actually, Super Size Me.
Yes, that was a great movie.
Right. It was a great documentary. And, again, McDonald's, they actually pulled the supersize option off their menu after this,
and again claimed that it wasn't because of that.
No, we just don't want to do it anymore. Right? Yeah, a week after the movie came out. Yeah, good timing. That's right, exactly. And Blackfish. This is another documentary that when people saw it, they were like, "Wait a minute." SeaWorld?
This is happening?
Yeah, that place we love with all the animals. They're not above board in some cases, and it turns out they weren't. I mean, the life for orcas that were living in captivity at SeaWorld, I mean, we got a glimpse in there, and it's not great.
Not good. Yeah,
and
the
now,
conditions and how they lived. Yeah, it's
exactly. And then you look at, locally we have a place called Marineland, which, thousands and thousands of people from all over used to show up to Marineland every year. And, maybe they still do, but they've had the spotlight pointed at them as well. And I think a lot of it comes from movies like Blackfish. And we were mentioning, scripted movies like Boyz in the Hood. The Day After Tomorrow, when that came out, people started to think, okay, well, maybe global warming is something that...
maybe we should look after our planet.
Right, exactly. When you see the effects of, like a glacier basically melting and flooding a city, it's like, okay, well, maybe we should...
this could happen.
Yeah, we should think about this. And Philadelphia was another one. Now it, I wouldn't say Philadelphia is a super woke movie in 2019. There's some issues with it, but and really at the end of the day, it is kind of a stuffy courtroom drama. But it did, shine the light on AIDS and maybe change some people's perspective and perceptions about AIDS. And so, culturally, I think it was important as a movie. I don't know if it holds up as well as maybe Boyz in the Hood does, but certainly had an impact on the culture. And you know what? Why don't we get into the Ice Cube discussion that I want to have?
Okay.
Because
about the rappers.
Yeah, because we both thought he was such a great actor in this movie, and it was his first movie. And why are rappers such good actors?
Because you see them in they're in every movie. Like all those guys from back then. Like Tupac was in movies,
right.
and
was he in Poetic Justice?
I think so. I'm not 100%
was that him?
sure.
Okay, because I know that was a John Singleton movie we mentioned earlier. But I mean, Mos Def is a great actor.
Yeah.
and Ice Cube is a great actor.
Eminem's
been
8 Mile.
in 8 Mile, and Ludacris has been in movies, and I mean, like, why is that? Why did they so seamlessly Method Man?
Yeah.
Why did
Method
they
and Redman and How High? Yeah.
Yeah. Why did they so seamlessly transition from the world of music into the world of movies? And I think a lot of it is because it's a much more performative style of music.
I think so. Yeah, you're right. I agree. Yeah.
And because the lyrics in a lot of cases are so
over the top almost, it
over
seems,
the top, but also
real.
a lot of times very realistic. Yeah, that was what I was like. We were watching this movie and Ice Cube's in it, and it's like there are things in the movie that I've heard Ice Cube talk about in songs.
Well, you mentioned that. You said the helicopters flying over the hood, right? And stuff like that.
And it's like I've heard about him talking that, and now I can see it on screen. And so
it's an easy transition
for them. And also, because he's being so realistic in his music and has to convey that on record and in concert and everything, I think they can transition very easily into being actors. And obviously, I mean, some of the best actors of the last 20 years are also rappers.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of interesting. Because I don't think, I don't know, did the guys in 3 Eye Blind become actors? I don't know. I just threw out another 90s one. But, I mean, that's an interesting thing.
It makes sense.
I think so. And anyway, Ice Cube was fantastic. Let's talk about our other favorite characters then while we're on the topic.
Do we want to do scenes or characters first?
Let's talk about characters since we were talking about Ice Cube. Okay. Because Doughboy is one of my favorite characters, and mostly because of the acting performance from Ice Cube and the fact that John Singleton as a 24-year-old was able to pull out this incredible performance from an inexperienced actor was incredible. Also, Furious Styles, played by Laurence Fishburne, who really in a lot of ways is kind of the moral center of the movie. He's, the voice of reason.
Yeah, he shows concern for his son, and he wants him to live a good life. He doesn't want him to end up dead or in jail or whatever, a life of crime. So
exactly. And his speech about the gentrification and everything, I mean, just really an incredible performance and a great character as well. Did you have another character?
No, that was mine too. Doughboy and Furious. Like I said, going back to Furious 2, even when it comes to like talking about sex and violence and education, and he's really just shaping Trey to be a good human being.
Exactly.
And I thought that was really good. And Doughboy, we've done a lot of talk about Ice Cube already. So, but those were my favorites as far as the characters go. Now scenes. I'm going to start with the one that I thought was pretty funny. When the recruiter came to visit Ricky. The USC recruiter he was coming to see. Maybe he's going to give him a scholarship. The house was a mess. Doughboy and his buddies are all being obnoxious out on the porch. The whole interaction between them was uncomfortable. It was entertaining and pretty funny. So that was...
But also, you know what? It's pretty amazing how that was done. I mean, the actor, I'm not sure who the actor is, unfortunately, who played the recruiter, but when he's walking in, you see him like kind of taking this all in. He takes a pause
and looks around at like what's going on.
And you almost see him sympathizing. Like you can tell that he wants Ricky to succeed. And, when Ricky's nervous about taking the SAT test, and he's saying like, don't worry about it. You just need a 700 and all this, and he's being very understanding, but also encouraging. Like you could do whatever you set your mind to. I think that's actually a line that he says.
And how many recruiters do you think these days are going in and doing that exact same thing? It probably still happens.
Yeah, I'm sure it does.
I believe it happens.
Absolutely,
still.
I'm sure it
does. And they see the kind of environment that these people come from, and it's hard to watch for some of them. I'm sure.
I'm sure. Yeah, it does have an emotional impact. You would think it would have to. Especially walking into their situation and experiencing it firsthand. And so, yes, you're right. That's an incredible scene. I love the break-in scene, which I mentioned when I was talking about my reaction. I mean, it's just so well shot, so well edited, acted. The music choice is great. And so that just visually and as a film nerd, that's a scene that really stuck out to me. And actually, I just mentioned the gentrification scene.
Great scene.
Yeah.
I mean, he had everybody's attention. The guys from across the street came over, and there's obviously they're up to no good, hanging out.
But also the elder
in the neighborhood guy comes over too, and but the way that Laurence Fishburne, Furious, did that scene, he was the center of attention, and everybody was locked in, and they didn't turn away, and everybody was listening. They kind of like, hey, he's right,
And what's cool is, so Laurence Fishburne. How old do you think he was when he made this movie? I'm not exactly sure.
He's probably in his 30s.
Maybe in his 30s at least. So, it has more life experience certainly than John Singleton does anyway, and some of the other guys who are in the movie. And so he's given this speech that is very wise and very intelligent, and, he's breaking it down for these people. This is what is happening in our community. And the fact that John Singleton wrote that, is so impressive.
Yeah, and he knows what's going on, right?
Yeah, really, really incredible stuff. So that was a great scene. When they were kids, going back to a scene earlier in the movie, the football scene.
Oh, yeah.
It's almost like a Stand By Me moment, just very...
Because they're going to find the dead body.
They're going to find a dead body, and that's,
Then the guy takes their football.
Yes, And so that scene, that whole interaction was very interesting, very well acted as well, and the ending.
The ending was eye-opening.
Now, where would you start the ending? Like where do you think the sort of end of the movie begins?
Well, I was going to say when Trey and Doughboy are meeting in the thing, but I mean, leading up to that, obviously the shooting in the parking lot there.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to point out was the when Trey meets with Doughboy after the smoke clears from the events of the previous day.
Okay.
You learn Doughboy's fate. You learn that Trey goes on to college and his girlfriend goes along to college as well.
Yeah. That was sometimes when they just use words on screen for the ending of a movie, sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, but in this case,
it worked.
Yeah,
in this case,
it was
worked.
brief. It wasn't long.
It was
long. Just like Doughboy was murdered 2 weeks later. What was it? He attended his brother's funeral the next day.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, he was murdered.
Yeah.
And then you learn about Trey and his girlfriend, and that's it. And it ends.
And right after a really heartfelt moment between Trey and Doughboy, and then we just watch Doughboy walking away.
And he fades away. Yeah, he fades out.
And he fades out. Yeah, so that was pretty powerful. I would even say like the ending of the movie, starting with Trey and Ricky walking to the store.
I guess that's would be the start.
And then everything
of the end, if you say.
Where does the end start?
Yeah.
I would say it starts there, and then everything that happens following that. I mean, it just is really powerful and heartbreaking in a lot of ways, and just what an incredible movie.
All right, is it woke?
Is it woke? Now, I think this is going to be a big category for this movie. And, we'll start off with something here, just a nitpick. Something that in 2019 Twitter would talk about is, there's some misogyny in this movie. Some words thrown around at women and things that just wouldn't fly. People would argue that, did that really have to be in the movie?
Did they need to put that into the movie?
Yeah, but, it was a different time, and it is a different culture from you and I. So I don't know. Maybe that's just part of the culture. So I don't know. That's one thing that people would point out. But as far as this movie goes, I think it's movies like this, and this movie in particular, they are the reason why we talk about are things woke, and the concept of woke. I think starts with stuff like this, because this really gives us an incredible look. I mean, we're two white guys from Canada, Southern Ontario, Canada, could not be farther. And really, we could take a 5-hour flight
go there,
to LAX,
but it would be a totally different world for us.
It might as well be China.
Yeah.
I mean, it really, on the map, it's not that far, but culturally, it's completely different. And so the fact that we can watch a movie like this, know that the guy who made it is from here, know that some of the actors are from there, and it's a really authentic portrayal of what life is like in that part of the world. I mean, that is incredibly important. And I think that's why this movie is still around, why people still talk about it, why it's still watched. And unfortunately, it's really sad that John Singleton passed away. And that's why a lot of people are probably revisiting it. I mean, truthfully, that's why we chose to do this episode now, so close to his death. I mean, maybe you're watching this in the future. He did pass away very recently, which is why we wanted to do this episode. And it's unfortunate that his death has sparked an interest in this movie again. But I mean, it really has still held up and has lasted a long time. And I think movies like this are very important. I think they will always be made. And so when we're talking about is it woke, I mean, this is where this concept starts with a movie like this. So anyway, I think, this was an incredible movie and so important.
All right, so that's our wrap for that one, and let's preview next week's show. We're going to be covering another classic, this time 12 Angry Men.
Right, a little older.
Yeah, a little bit older, a little bit of a...
Equally classic.
Now, you've seen it, obviously.
Many
I
times.
haven't, and I don't generally watch a lot of classic movies. We've discussed this. But after watching Citizen Kane, we did that a few weeks ago, I found a new appreciation for them, and I'm really excited to see what it's about. I have an understanding that's about a jury, and they're in a room trying to figure out verdict.
Something. Yeah.
What are they trying to figure out?
So
I don't know.
Like you said, Citizen Kane, black and white movie. It's from 1941. This one's a little bit later. It's from 1956, I want to say. We'll get the details right if that's not right next week. But it is a black and white movie, and it's a classic movie, and some really classic actors as well. So I think you're going to like it. To me, this is one of the greatest movies of all time, as far as I'm concerned. And I think this might be a perfect movie. I think this might be a perfect movie, and we'll see if you agree with me. That's coming up next week. You're tuned in with to watch this with Eryk and Brandon. Thanks to producers Lucas, Joe, our editor Shelby as well. I hope you'll join us next week.
Thanks for watching.